thank you for taking out time, of course, sharing your insights, your analysis with us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus away from the United States towards what's taking place in the Middle East. We're now learning that hospital officials in Gaza have received the bodies of 15 Palestinians from Israel following the return of IDF Staff Sergeant Itay Chen's remains last night. This brings the number of Palestinian bodies returned to Gaza over the past month to 285 in exchange for the remains of 19 Israelis returned by Hamas. Hamas has also turned over the bodies of 2 foreign nationals, one from Thailand and another from Nepal. Israel has been releasing 15 Palestinian remains for each Israeli hostage returned. Fewer than half of the bodies have been identified due to a lack of DNA testing kits in Gaza. The Gazan Health Ministry has been posting photos online in hopes that families will recognize them. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Peter Baum, foreign editor of Weekly Blitz, joining us from London. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. We once again see Israel is living up to its obligations under the first phase of the ceasefire agreement that had been inked. It's returned 15 more Palestinian bodies to Gaza after it had received the remains of the IDF's staff sergeant last night, Itay Chen. What do you make of what's transpiring on the ground and the delays we're seeing as far as Gaza, the Gazan ministry returning the bodies to Israel is concerned? We've of course been discussing it day after day. How long do you think this can continue for?
Hi, good afternoon, Pia, and thank you for having me on your program again. Well, the return of bodies must be seen by all parties as a positive sign, because if nothing else, it keeps the phase 1 of the peace process going. Now, obviously, Hamas are trying to delay the return of the bodies for as long as possible. They're eking out the time frame because they need to re-establish themselves politically and probably militarily in Gaza. And this is the only leverage they currently have, because they're currently being isolated by even their former supporters. So returning the bodies bit by, sorry, I shouldn't say that, returning the bodies every other day clearly is still a good sign to keep the peace process going. And whilst Israelis are simultaneously doing the same, then there is certainly hope that phase 1 can be achieved. However, everyone watching this scenario is still very uncertain and afraid that there may be another terrorist outrage, a significant one, which would destroy phase 1. But at the moment, it seems that certainly, as you quite rightly said, Israel is fulfilling its commitment, and Hamas, though not returning the bodies in one go, is certainly continuing to give, excuse me, hostages, the dead hostages, back to Israel. So I'd rather look at it as a positive rather than negative.
Indeed, and I'd like to digress a little bit over here. We've also recently learned that the Trump administration is mulling at the moment a request by Saudi Arabia for the sale of as many as 48 F-35 fighter jets. Of course, we do know that ties between US and Israel have never been closer than at the moment. Washington is committed to Israel's request of maintaining a qualitative edge in the Middle East, at least in the military terms. What if this sale does go through, if these murmurs do hold true? What could this then signify as far as the balance of power is concerned? We do know that US is allies with Saudi Arabia as well, but Saudi Arabia does not recognize Israel. Recently, there was a statement put out by the Saudis that they would not be a part of the Abraham Accords until and unless a two-state solution is reached.
Yeah, this is a very interesting one. You know, I think Israel were more concerned about the sale of Typhoon jets to Turkey by the United Kingdom than they would be about the sale of these
F-35.
fighter aircraft to Saudi Arabia. There is no doubt that the Shia-Sunni divide is assisting Israeli-Saudi ties. And I think one of Trump's wishes before he leaves office is to get Saudi in the Abraham Accords. Now, there may be caveats applied to the sale of aircraft to Saudi. One of them, indeed, may be that Saudi must come to the table and join in the Abraham Accords. She has said that they would not happen until there was a two-state solution. But I would not be sure of that, because don't forget, prior to October the 7th, Saudi were about to sign the Abraham Accords without there being a two-state solution.
Yes.
And I think she could go back to that original position still. So the sale of the jets to Saudi, I think the balance of power would certainly more, I think Iran should be more worried than Israel about the sale of the jets, because frankly, I think Saudi-Israeli ties, though no publicly shown, are quite strong, and they do help each other from an intelligence perspective. So the balance of power would shift, but I don't think from an Israeli perspective they would be too concerned, given the way that the United States is playing the broker between the two.
Indeed, sir. Requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some other developments from the Middle East. We're now learning that Palestinians in Gaza City are struggling to rebuild their lives amid rubble and shattered buildings. Basic necessities remain out of reach, and aid is still not reaching Gazans in sufficient amounts, almost 4 weeks after the ceasefire deal was reached. Displaced Palestinians are returning to their partially destroyed homes. One of them has described daily life as extremely difficult, with no gas and his children fetching water and firewood. The truce, of course, is meant to bring aid, but only half of the required food is entering the enclave, according to the World Food Programme. Israel claims it is fulfilling its obligations, but Gaza's local administration says that many supply trucks are still blocked by restrictions. With winter approaching, now Gazans face a lack of shelter as tents wear thin and buildings remain damaged. Listen in to what a displaced Palestinian has had to say.
احنا عايشين بحاجة صعبة كتير كتير كتير. في ناس كتير اجت على بيوتها ورجعت تاني على الجنوب. نص ولادها هان نص ولادها في الجنوب، لانه مش ملاقيين لا مسكن ولا شرب ولا كهرباء ولا شيء ملاقيين. عندنا هان احنا بعد الساعة 5 المغرب ما بتلاقيش حدا موجود في المنطقة. ظلام تام.
More news coming in. We're now learning that Iranian authorities have stated that Mahdi Efendiari, an Iranian citizen who was arrested in France in February on charges of promoting terrorism, has been freed and is now at the Iranian embassy in Paris. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has stated that Efendiari, who will face trial, must report regularly to police. Listen in.
تحت عنوان جاسوسی محکوم شده بودند که قوه قضاییه دیشب فکر می‌کنم مشهور دفعات اسلامی شدن و آزاد شدن. شهروند ما در فرانسه خانم اسفندیاری الان آزاد هستند، در سفارت ما هستند و ان شاء الله مراحل دادگاهشون.
Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has spoken with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, welcoming the conditional release of Cécile Kohler and Jacques Paris as a first step and calling for their full and complete release as soon as possible. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Peter Baum, foreign editor of Weekly Blitz. Interesting developments happening in Iran and France. We do know that France is part of the E3 powers that, of course, were instrumental in ensuring that the snapback sanctions are brought about against Iran by the UNSC. But we're seeing this also happening on the diplomatic front. In fact, an Iranian citizen arrested in France has now been freed, is in the Iranian embassy in Paris. A trial is awaited. But in a related development, there's also been a conditional release of French citizens in Iran itself, two to be specific. How do you view this development diplomatically? Is this a sign of some sort of steps being taken in order to ensure that eventually dialogue might resume? Is this an indication of that?
Yes, indeed. Now, one has to look at this from, first of all, an Iranian perspective, because they have never been isolated since the totalitarian theocrats came into power politically as they are currently. Iran is running out of friends on the global stage. Not only that, she's running out of money, and her infrastructure has been so badly damaged by the effects of climate change and mismanagement and corruption, one should say, that domestically Iran are under severe pressure. The last reports I heard were that Tehran, the capital, would probably be running out of water within the next 3 to 4 weeks if there's no sufficient rainfall, and the long-term weather forecast is that there won't be. So politically, Iran needs to do something to regain credibility and assistance from those countries that formerly were helpful to her, France being one of them. So I think the current, let's say, prisoner swap, to put it for want of a better term, is certainly going to pave the way for increased dialogue between the two countries, and that Iran believes will lead to increased dialogue between herself and other European nations. France will pave the way for that because the sanctions, the snapback sanctions, are really hitting Iran hard. So I see from an Iranian perspective that she will be more compliant and facilitate more and step down from the rhetoric that she likes to employ when times are more favourable to her.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank you for taking our time sharing your analysis with us on NewsX World. All right, with that, viewers, it's a wrap.